anything that requires this, they're almost certainly going to ask the question about the uses of the acyl chloride versus the acid anhydride, and it's the same points they want every time. So the acyl chloride it's more reactive, but it's more dangerous. This one is less reactive. It's less reactive, but actually that often plays in its favour. So the points you're going to want to get across about why we want to maybe use the acid anhydride instead of the acyl chloride is we have a less toxic byproduct. So it's a less toxic byproduct. The acyl chloride forms HCl, whereas the acid anhydride forms some sort of carboxylic acid. Typically you're going to be using ethanoic anhydride, and so this is going to be ethanoic acid. So this is less volatile and it's a weaker acid. So HCl is a very strong acid and it's much more volatile, so you're much more likely to end up breathing it in. Now the acyl chloride is a more exothermic reaction. Now that's not too much of an issue on a small scale. So when if we're using either of these two, that's not a massive issue, as we're using quite small containers that have a relatively high surface area to volume ratio. So if it gets hot, it can quite easily dissipate the heat away. But if you're doing this on an industrial scale, so you're trying to make an ester or an amide on an industrial scale, so you're dealing with like thousands of litres. If the reaction starts to heat up, the reaction goes faster, releases more heat, and you end up with a positive feedback loop, and it can end up being very, very dangerous. So that's how the sort of major chemical explosions normally take place, is a sort of runaway feedback loop between generating heat, speeding up the reaction, which generates more heat, and the pressure just builds up until it explodes. So being more exothermic is a definite negative, certainly when we're dealing on a large scale. And then the last point for the acid anhydride is simply that it's cheaper. I don't know why, it's just cheaper. So those are the points you're going to want to get across if you're asked about the acid, why we might prefer to use the acid anhydride. You're going to say it produces a less toxic byproduct. You might want to throw in that the byproduct is, say, ethanoic acid or propanoic acid versus HCl, and that it's safer because it's a less exothermic reaction, so less heat is released. And finally, that it's cheaper, that it just costs less. So those are the three main points you're going to want to get across. Right, so that's really the core stuff that I've run over. I'll set you a bunch of questions, so you can have a practice at those mechanisms and some exam questions where you can practice those points. Say these ones here, practice your exam technique.